Members of the board.
Good morning and welcome to the County of Berrien. It's a pleasure to have you all here today on this snowy January morning. Just a little bit of housekeeping for those who haven't attended before. Please turn off any electronic devices or silence them during the duration of our meeting. Any materials that you wish to have distributed to the board, please do so by giving it to our Sergeant of Arms, which is Commissioner Jim Kern. And if you wish to address the board, do so by going to the podium, stating your name, jurisdiction, and you have 2 minutes to speak with the board at that time. With that being said, we'll go to roll call, Madam Chair, or Madam Clerk.
I got promoted. Bell.
Here.
Curran.
Here.
Harrison.
Here.
Hinkleman.
Here.
LeJaric. Ott. Pitchford.
Here.
Ballraff.
Here.
Werfel.
Here.
Yarborough. Elliott. Freeling.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have 8 present, 4 absent.
Thank you very much.
Here comes Alex.
All right, and we're slowly trickling in, and that we would want everybody to be safe to get here, and we appreciate those efforts. Moving on in the agenda, good morning. Approval of the minutes from January 11th for Committee of the Whole.
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made by Commissioner Pitchford. Is there support? Support by Commissioner Volrath. Is there any discussion on the minutes? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Minutes are approved. Requisition review.
Good morning. Does anybody have any questions about the requisitions? Perfect, thank you.
All right, that will make its way around. So now we can get into the part of the meeting, and I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
So members of the board, Maureen is here today. So this is Maureen Adams representing the Veteran Services Department. And I asked her to come and talk with you about a service that occurred through her department over the last couple of weeks. Incredible story, just absolute dedication to customer service from her department. And then the delivery of the benefit that she's going to talk about. I mean, I was picking my jaw up. So Maureen, I would love for you just to walk them through what occurred and how big of a win this is.
Hi, good morning. So I got pretty excited. I wanted to share with Brian, and what I really need is a big bell in my office for when this kind of stuff happens, because it was great. Brian McNeely, who is our new part-time service officer, you may recall he was a service officer in Alaska and came down here. He's going to be setting up an office in Niles. And we were invited to go to a Veterans Day event at the Buchanan Senior Center. That's the kind of stuff we never had the manpower to do before. So Brian's all in, he goes to the event. And while he's there, a gentleman asked him, can you I have a claim in and I haven't heard anything about my claim. Can you check on it? So Brian gets his information and looks it up and finds out the VA has closed his claim from 2019. So he gets back in touch with the gentleman and lets him know what's going on and would you like me to refile this claim? And guy gives him the thumbs up. So Ryan refiles it and the VA opens it, and for reasons that we'll never know why, they closed his claim in error. So he had been rated at a 10% rating. His rating went up to 100%. And so the VA then took that 100% and paid him back retroactively to 2019 because it was their error in closing the claim. So the gentleman received, I believe it was $100,451 and some change. But what made this even more exciting is this gentleman turned 101 on December 23rd. So yeah, it was a huge win. We made a paper crown for Ryan and celebrated. It was great. So yeah, that was a big win for our office. And to me, that Ryan was like, it's my job. It's what I do. But I truly believe that this gentleman has been walking around since 2019 wondering, what's going on with my claim? And probably people were telling him, call the VA to get a status report. Nobody was listening to him. And Ryan, he took the time, stopped to listen and took action. And we're pretty excited about that.
Hey, Maureen,
Yeah,
can
it's
you
really cool.
mention which war did he serve in?
He was in World War II. Yep, he was a World War II vet. So pretty exciting. Thanks for letting me share that with you.
Gotta like good
Thanks.
news on a Thursday like that. That's
Extremely
great.
well done.
So
That's
thank you.
awesome. Thank you, Maureen.
That was a good win.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Members of the board, the next update is a legislative update from Mike Crombeen. I'm going to remind the other group, just as Mike is talking with you, we're going to shut down the microphones in the room to avoid feedback from the speaker system. If you have questions, just give Annette a second. She'll turn the volume down, then you can turn your microphone on and we can avoid some feedback. Mike is joining us from Lansing. Mike put together some notes. Those have been forwarded out to the board. And then this is your meeting. Fire away with any questions that you have of Mike as it relates to the upcoming legislative session. Otherwise, I'm guessing Mike is ready.
It looks like he's ready on the screen.
Okay, I'm going to slide to the back just so I can better see and hear him.
All right, and I'm gonna slide over here.
All right, Mike, I'm going to shut down my microphone. Just go ahead and take it away.
Sounds good. I appreciate you guys hosting me again this morning. Hope everybody had a good holiday season and nobody is snowed in. I know it's been bitterly cold and I'm not allowed to complain because the amount of lake effect you guys get down there is a little bit more than what I get up here. We're off to sort of a weird fast and furious start to 2024. So I'm going to back up and give a little bit of the landscape and then we'll kind of shift into issues. So at the end of November, the legislature adjourned early for what they would traditionally adjourn for a year, in part because two Democratic House lawmakers had won local mayor races. And so after that first full week in November, they vacated their House seats to take those mayor positions, leaving us with a 54-54 partisan breakdown in the House. Based on the House rules, you still need 56 votes to elect a new speaker, to change the leadership team, all of those types of things. And so we still have a democratically controlled House with a Democratic leadership team, a Democratic speaker, Democratic chairs, but it requires now 50% plus one of members elected and serving, so 55 votes to pass anything off the House floor. And so it's changed the dynamic of moving legislation as we head into 2024, meaning that you will need at least one Republican yes vote on any package of bills. You got to get to 55 any way you can get it. There are special elections in those seats, primary set for January. So we'll know those later this month. And then in April, we'll get the general election. So we will be back to, presumably back to a 56-54 Democratic majority, just based on the sort of partisan breakdown and the geography of the seats in April. But it will just shift sort of the dynamics in Lansing from what we've seen in 2023 for at least the first part of 2024. In addition to that, the courts had ruled that Michigan's maps in part were unconstitutional. And so our independent redistricting commission, which had put together the maps, are now going back to the drawing board, as the courts have told them, to redraw lines. Now, all of the seats that were ruled unconstitutional are in the Metro Detroit area. By the nature of these maps, if you change one district, there's sort of a ripple effect and you'll change the next one because they all connect. But it's not expected that the new maps would reach down to your neck of the woods. It would just be sort of Metro Detroit that's impacted. But what that means is the House will have some new maps for 2024 on that side of the state, and then the Senate will have new maps for 2026. So that is sort of a weird political landscape. And then what we had on Friday of last week was the consensus revenue estimating conference. So the state, a couple times a year, brings in economists, both the House fiscal, Senate fiscal, the budget office, U of M, to talk through what state revenues look like. Unlike the federal government, we can't run a deficit, we can't print money, and so we can only spend in an annual year that which we bring in, and so the CREC is what helps us determine that. By and large, I think it's good economic news that was sort of delivered. Inflation rates, predicted to come down, although probably not as fast as people would like. State revenues moving upward slightly, but not aggressively. Bottom line is, year over year, we're expected to have for fiscal year 25, $785 million more than fiscal year 24. And since the last CREC in May of last year, it's about 400 million more. So you may see in the news different numbers reported. Really, it's just a variation of whether or not they're reporting the year over year numbers or the since our last consensus revenue estimating numbers. But state revenues are trending in the right direction. And that is, at the same time of seeing some of these things that'll be phased in. So the retirement tax credit is going to be phased in over the next couple of years. There is a 1-year rollback in the income tax based on, state revenue growth that impacts 24. And so, not astronomically more money, but, strong revenue growth is, I think, a good thing as the state tries to figure out, how to spend those things and prioritize. I'm going to kind of go through a couple of these, and there's lots of stuff going on as we get ready for 24, but then I want to turn it over to questions so we can do maybe a deeper dive on some of these things. One, I want to mention that a group was formed called Citizens for Local Choice. I know that this commission sent a resolution as it related to the renewable energy siting bills last session. This group is sort of just getting up and running, but they are seeking to put a ballot initiative together for November of 24 that would essentially reverse that legislation and retain local control. They've got to get language approved through the Board of Canvassers. Once they do that, they'll have basically 180 days. So, once the snow melts, to get a little over 350,000 signatures to put that on the November ballot. I don't know enough yet about how well organized this group is, how well funded this group might be, and what the likelihood of that is. But I did want to highlight that the group has been formed and that there are efforts underway on sort of that local control piece of it. Package of bills in House Health Policy are likely to get some movement starting this week related to lead abatement. The package sort of focuses on, reporting requirements as it relates to lead levels in the blood of children. There is a bill that would put a excise tax on a gallon of paint and use that for lead abatement. I know that in Berrien County, particularly in Benton Harbor, there's been a lot of work done on replacing those lead lines. And so, I highlight that as something that's just getting started here in 24, but something to watch. And certainly if any commissioners want to be kept abreast of that package and more details as it moves forward, I'm happy to do that. Short-term rental legislation is probably the next, biggest controversial issue that I think we're likely to see in 2024. Rep. Andrews and others are working on a package of bills on creating a short-term rental act. The basic framework for that legislation is that it would retain local control. And so, in previous sessions, and I believe this group had put in a resolution in previous sessions against short-term rental bills that were being pushed by the realtors and others. This bill will not open up the Zoning and Enabling Act. So in previous sessions, what I think you're used to seeing is a bill that says, a short-term rental is a by right residential use, and you can't regulate that, you can't zone that. That is not what these bills do. So these bills will create a short-term rental act, create some minimum requirements for those that are operating short-term rentals. It essentially would register the platforms, the Airbnbs, the VRBOs. It would create I believe it'll be a 6% excise tax on short-term rentals that would then fund a state registry of all of the short-term rentals in the state so that local units of governments could sort of see what's being rented and how many days in their communities. And then the remaining after the cost of that registration from the state side would be retained by the locals. So the way I think it's envisioned, and it's likely to be introduced here in January, is that the money would stay with the local unit of government where the short-term rental is at. Now, that doesn't mean county, is my understanding, is that this legislation would keep the money with the township or the city where the short-term rental is located. But I know that all of you, while you serve on the County Board of Commission, also represent communities, within the county. And some probably see this as a larger issue than others, just depending on where you represent. But it is, I don't think in any, I don't think it's a slam dunk. I don't think this is a bill that's going to get introduced and move very rapidly. There are a lot of conversations happening between, Michigan Municipal League, Michigan Township Association, CVB Association, Restaurant and Lodging Association, the Airbnbs and VRBOs of the world, the Michigan Realtors Association. And so while I think we're going to see something here introduced yet in January, this is likely to be a several-month process that will see some shifting on exactly what this thing looks like. So I'm happy to, after I get through some of this, take more questions on that one. I know that'll be a big one for you. I want to highlight very quickly some other things that I think will be priorities for the Michigan Association of Counties broadly, but that would also impact you all. One is we're likely to see movement in the Senate here in the first quarter this year on the Revenue Sharing Trust Fund. This bill passed the House, I think like 105 or 106 yes votes last year. And we've got to get it through the Senate, but it would essentially create a formula for making sure that those dollars that went out to revenue sharing stay within that cycle. There's a split between counties, cities, and townships on what that looks like. But everybody is singing Kumbaya, and it seems to have broad bipartisan support. So the goal is to get that done as quickly as possible. Again, I'm not sure if there'll be any political issues. It's already through the House, so the 54-54 split shouldn't be an issue, and it passed with broad bipartisan support, so we're likely to see movement on that. There's going to be a push for more money for county prosecutors in this budget. I know that's resources, regardless of county department, have been are always an issue, but I think there's sort of a broad collection of folks that are saying that county prosecutors across the state are lacking in resources. So that'll be something where individual counties are weighing in, but also MAC, County Prosecutors Association. I think we're likely to see some movement on that. Some talk about healthcare costs for county jails, specifically when those incarcerated could be added back to health plans, Medicaid, those types of things that would alleviate some healthcare costs for county jails. There's been some movement at the federal level, and other states have received some waivers on this. And so I know that a coalition of folks are pushing for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services to apply for a waiver that would allow folks to be given their healthcare back at 30 days or 60 days. That would alleviate both some costs on the county jails, but also from a continuation of care perspective, if an individual is, being treated for, substance abuse or whatever it might be, getting them back on their healthcare prior to release, as opposed to, hey, you've been released, now you've got to go set this thing up, right? So we'll see if there's some movement on that. And then the other really big one is road funding. And I'm not sure where this goes, but there have been lots of conversations between a lot of statewide organizations on potential ways of funding road infrastructure. I don't know that anybody's agreed on what that looks like. You know, at some level, there's only so many ways to get more dollars. But people are talking about, you know, what does the future of the gas tax look like, particularly as, you know, fuel efficiencies go up, more people are driving electric vehicles. You know, you've got, you know, conversations continue to pop up on registration fees or a vehicle miles traveled. I know toll roads is, you know, something that gets talked about quite freely. I think probably by March, we'll see a coalition of organizations kind of coalesce around, hey, here's what we think might be the best option for road funding. But I don't know what that'll be yet. I did have a conversation with the Michigan Association of Counties about that. They are deeply involved in that coalition. And so, you know, they'll keep us in the loop on where those negotiations go. Other organizations as part of that, you know, County Road Association, MITA, I mean, all of the folks that you would think about are a part of this conversation about how do we fund road infrastructure. So I know that's sort of a lot, but we haven't talked in a while and we're off to a fast and furious 24, but what questions can I answer from you all?
Okay, I didn't know if you got the sound system going. Hi, Mike. My question is regarding the health care for the incarcerated. What does that mean? Does that mean that our medical providers would then be filing claims? The county would have to file claims for reimbursement? What does that mean?
Yeah, I can get more detail on it. I don't know exactly where this goes, but essentially it's a Medicaid waiver that's been granted in another state, and I'll have to figure out what it looks like. And there are conversations here in Michigan. And so if you've got an individual who's on Medicaid, my understanding is their healthcare coverage is basically suspended while they're incarcerated. And so the jail takes you know, provides the cost of healthcare coverage. And I know I've toured your county jail facility and seen the facilities there, but those are costs that the county incurs. The thought process, I think, from a high level public policy perspective is if you can get an individual back on their Medicaid coverage prior to release, from a continuation of care perspective, whether that's 30 days or 60 days or whatever that looks like, they are more likely to be successful, particularly when you talk about things like substance abuse, as opposed to releasing them from the jail facility and then, you know, saying, hey, you've got to go get this thing set up. And so I think there probably would be some process by which you know, county jails from an administrative perspective would help facilitate that process. And I'm not sure what those details look like, but I can find them. But also it should mean cost savings for county jail facilities that are not only providing the healthcare for those individuals that are incarcerated, but often doing it at retail rates, right? And so when we think about health insurance and, you know, what Medicaid reimburses providers for, versus what you all are paying providers for services, there may be some cost savings there. And so perhaps maybe what makes some sense, and I'll defer to this group and to Brian, but if there are folks from the county jail facility, this body that want to have a conversation, we could set up a conversation with relevant folks from the department and get a list of questions on, you know, how this waiver process is working. It's extremely new, but I think there's a push from county jail facilities across the state and from MAC to get the Department of Health and Human Services to apply for a waiver from the federal government.
Good morning, Mike. This is around House Bill 4981, the eligibility criteria for county sheriffs when they're running for election. Could you speak to where that might be in the Senate and kind of what are the reverberating effects that might have if passed?
Can you give me that bill number one more time, Commissioner?
4981.
Okay. Just make sure I'm looking at the right one here. Okay, so this is the one that requires folks to be licensed essentially through MCOLs before being a county sheriff. So there have been, I think, high level across the state, some situations because sheriff is an elected position where folks have felt like the individuals that have run for that elected position may not have been qualified from a law enforcement standpoint. The bill would require that the individual be licensed under MCOLs, which is the sort of the statewide standard, for at least 5 years, but it does grandfather in anybody that's currently elected. So it wouldn't impact anybody across the state that, you know, didn't meet the requirement, but has already been elected. I think it's gotten broad support from law enforcement folks. I think there's been some pushback from, I don't know if elections groups is the right way to see it, but I think there's some folks that say, you know, listen, the way this was intended is that this is a elected person who's accountable to the voters. And so, you know, we don't care if they've got the training or not. We want the voters to be able to say, this is, you know, who we've selected, is sort of the high level arguments from both sides on that thing. It did pass the House in November, right before they went on break. Bipartisan support, not a slam dunk. I think it got around 70 votes as it passed the House. So, you know, you're looking at just under 70% support in the House. I've not had conversations with folks in the Senate, but I'm happy to do that and see where folks' heads are at, when it might get a hearing, talk to the, you know, the local contingency on where they might be, if that's of interest to this body as well.
And Mr. Chairman, you could educate me on this as well. For things like prosecutors and judges, do you have to have a bar license to run for those positions?
Well, I think you're going to need one by the time you're sworn in, certainly. Michigan's a captive state also, in the sense that you can't work unless you're a member of the state bar of Michigan. I think there's an exemption, though, for government employees and probably the federal people. Federal prosecutors, federal judges can be members if they wish, but they don't have to be because they're working in the federal system. Now, Prosecutor Perangeli is here. Do you have to be a member of the State Bar of Michigan to hold your office?
I have to be a licensed lawyer.
Okay, and to be a licensed lawyer in Michigan, you got to pay these exorbitant dues to the Michigan State Bar, which is crazy, because in Indiana, I can be a member. I can have an Indiana Supreme Court license, and then the State Bar is a separate organization. Michigan, you got to pay to be a member of the State Bar. So anyway, Mike, that wasn't for you, but you now know the answer if it comes up anytime.
Perfect.
Bob?
Good morning, Mike. Bob Harrison. So going back to an issue you and I have talked about, the local ability to review the speed studies done on a local side road or the like. You know, as you remember, we've had 2 citizen groups in Lincoln Township very upset with the speed study done by the road department and the state police, and looking for some type of legislative action to give local unit of government the ability to overturn that final determination. So have you heard any chatter on that?
Yeah, so the the bill, I believe, is a Rep Slaw bill, and I'm trying to find the exact number. Give me 1 second. 4012 is the bill. It did get out of the House before the end of the year, and I know you and I have had a conversation on this. So when it moved, it's not tie-bound, I don't believe, but it moved with another bill that had to do with the same act that governs speed limits. So Will Snyder, Democrat from Muskegon, had a bill in that act. Brad Slaw is a Republican from West Michigan. The two bills essentially moved out of the House together. It did pass with 100 votes in the House in October, so it did get broad bipartisan support. I think it was held up more with personality and political issues than policy issues in 2023. I will follow up as lawmakers return in January on potential hearing and timeline in the Senate. But I don't think that there are major policy issues with the bill. I think it's more about, the political will to get this thing done. So I'll figure out what that timeline looks like. I'll talk to the chair of Senate Transportation, and I'll also talk with the local delegation in the Senate to see if we can't figure out, if they can apply some pressure to move that as well.
Any other questions for Mike while we have him linked in here? Okay, Brian?
Yep, members of the board, if you have any follow-up questions for Mike, feel free, just send them to me. Thank you. And I will connect with him. As it relates to the jail medical bill, I've already emailed Mike, and I'll arrange some time for Chuck and I to have a conversation with him about how that legislation is coming together. With that said, we do have one very important guest to see the board today. If it's okay, love to shut down our conversation with Mike and get to that guest.
Just one thing, and that's handing out one more requisition that was inadvertently omitted from the list that was approved. So we'll need to take care of this one, and then we can get to the special guest.
So I know I don't have a mic, sorry, but so I missed the road wrecks on the rec list. I apologize. This is their part. They had it to me and I didn't get it on the list. I missed it. So what that will do is change the full list to 819,330 to include all of theirs on that.
Okay.
So if anybody has any questions, we can talk about that, but I need to have that re-signed then.
All right, and so we can take care of that sometime before we all go home today, but right now, is it good to approve the $543,168.46 representing the road wreck? Is there a motion to do that?
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Pitchford, is there support? Pardon? Did you want it done now, or?
I just needed to have you, because what I presented to you didn't include those on it.
Okay.
And then I passed around the sheet and everybody signed
Everybody
it.
sign, got
So
it.
we need to have a new one done to
All right,
include
well,
those.
never mind then.
I'll
We'll just
withdraw my motion.
We'll withdraw the motion and we'll deal with it at 10:30.
Okay, thank you, sorry about that.
Okay, thanks. Now, the special guest is here.
Yes, sir. Members of the board, earlier this week, the Herald Palladium put out a lengthy article related to the prosecutor's office and the passing of the torch. So Mr. Weaver was featured in that article, and Mr. Weaver's replacement is in front of you. Your prosecutor is here. I will happily hush up and let him describe what you are looking at.
I'd first like to say, this is Zoe, our new canine advocate. I did not bring Zoe here in any way to ask for money for the office. I did not hold a septic. But Zoe is going to be she is our new canine advocate. She is a 1 year yellow lab. Taylor Cook, one of our young assistant prosecutors, is gonna be the owner and handler, one of the handlers. Our victim advocate also handles her. Now, as she is a 1 year yellow lab, she's still in her training mode. So we have Mr. Weaver probably gonna retire sometime in the early summertime. He is mentoring Zoe right now, but actually, for her age and the type of dog she's phenomenal. And she's gonna be one. What's that? She's 1 year. So she's probably about a good 4 months from getting into the courtroom on a consistent basis. But like I said, we have Mr. Weaver here and we're super excited for Zoe. I mean, she is awesome. The canine advocacy program is, oh, sorry. The worst part was I had to like walk around with my hands in the pocket. You're not allowed to pet her while she was training. And I've got a couple dogs, so I always love playing with dogs. So, the impact she's had, or Mr. Weaver's had on victims and allowing them to tell their story in as best a way they can, in the most relaxed way they can, even if they're talking about some of the worst times in their life, it cannot be measured, the impact that Mr. Weaver's had. So we are so excited to be able to continue that. We're very fortunate to continue that with Zoe. So, and we're very fortunate to have Taylor Cook in our office as the owner. So now you guys got to meet Zoe.
Is Mr. Weaver with the Taylors?
Yes, Mr. Weaver has been with the chief assistant, Jeff Taylor, since 2014 when he started in our office, and he will go into retirement still with the Taylors. He's their dog. So Jeff has taken care of Mr. Weaver for the last 10 years, provided all the vet treatments and everything along those lines. And Taylor Cook will continue to do that for Zoe. And there will be some kind of party for Mr. Weaver that everybody will be invited to. Believe me, his retirement will outmatch any prosecutor's retirement or judge's retirement, because quite frankly, yeah, absolutely. Can't imagine anything bad happening. It will, yeah. Mr. Weaver is the most beloved member.
I thought I heard you say that Mr. Weaver's retirement party will be slightly better than Sheriff Bailey's retirement party. Is that the plan?
It's good. It's gonna be a party. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So, but I wanted everybody to be able to meet Mr. Not Mr. Weaver, Zoe. Yeah, for 1-year-old lab. If anybody's ever owned a lab, this is pretty good. This is really good. So.
Mr. Chairman, that completes everything on your agenda for committee of the whole.
Okay. Any other business? All right, let's break for committees and come back at 10:30. Anybody have any public comments they really wanted to make? Apparently not, because they're leaving. All right. Well, we'll hear from them at 10:30 then. Save the thought. Right.